Well, I suppose you played Relivio and Kick the Can and Catty with 2 sticks. But did you ever play Pussy Four Corners on Grattan Bridge? Well, years ago when this was Essex Bridge, Pussy Four Corners was played by Zosimus. He used to stand here. On the far side, Anastasia, Dirty Dick McGrain's wife. On Essex Bridge, she cleared her throat. 6 a penny was her note. That's where she stood. Down here at the corner stood Fat Mary, the prima donna of the Dublin streets. And over the far side, Stony Pockets. Poor old Stony was afraid his head would fly off. He put stones in one pocket to keep him up straight and to stop his head from spinning away. Zosimus, Michael Morden, the blind ballad singer or reciter. Well, there was nothing wrong with his ears. When he couldn't hear the jingle of the coins, he'd say, wait, Stony, Stony, is there a crowd around me? Are they all gone? Where are they gone? And of course then he'd ask to be taken up to O'Connor's of Francis Street, where he got his whiskey droppings. This was all the whiskey that spilled while it was being poured out by the shaky hands, bartenders, and that'd all go into a train and be kept for Zosimus. But this bridge was Essex Bridge. Then of course when the new bridge was built they called it Grattan Bridge. He also stood up in Smithfield and around Parton Street and the markets and anywhere that there was a crowd. But here he had 2 ways of the crowd. He had the crowd going to the Capel Street music halls, and he had the other crowd, the gentry of course, going up to Dublin Castle. Of course, Grattan Bridge was designed by Bindon Stoney, but the old Essex Bridge was rebuilt and redesigned by George Semple. George's grandfather said to him one day, look son, the money is in the water. Learn how to build underwater. And George only went to school for about 12 weeks, went out to the Comac and the Tolka and the Paddle and started messing around underwater. And he got the contract of building this bridge. And you know how he built it? From a French book. He couldn't understand a word of French, but he read the drawings at the back of the book by a Frenchman who had written a book on the designs of Westminster Bridge. When Bindon Stoney was building this bridge, George Semple's foundations were so good, the present bridge was built on the old foundations. Do you remember Barney Connaughton, the Point Duty man that stood there in Capel Street Bridge for 40 years ago? Tall as a rush, a little Errol Flynn Ronnie, and the fingers going, flashing cars and buses and everything flying in all directions. Do you see those traffic lights? Well, Barney would leave them haymaking. About 40 years ago, a story went around Dublin that the chief of police in New York came over to Capel Street Bridge. He stood here, watching Barney. After about 10 minutes, he went out to see Barney. You're the fastest in the world. We want you for Times Square. Asks Barney, looking down at him, I don't think I could go. Why not, says the chief of police. Asks Barney, I kind of like the buildings around Capel Street Bridge. Well, the granite and red brick corner of the Bank of Ireland, that was the Bank of Ireland's first branch on the north side. And then, of course, my memories of that building is the top windows there. The Institute of Ballroom Dancing. Frank Sherwin, Morrissini Whelan, Bertha Dixon, learning how to do the tango and the military two-step and the quick foxtrot and the slow waltz and all the dances that we learned. That used to be Killy Kelly's. And Robert Emmet took that in 1803 and had men in every window with blunderbusses facing up Parliament Street. T&R Goodbody, Grenville Tobacco Factory, 200 girls hand-rolling cigarettes. And of course the far corner, sunlight chambers. And of course the variegation around it is men working, ploughing and bricklaying and doing all sorts of jobs, fishermen dirty in their clothes working hard, and underneath women drawing water, washing the clothes, and of course in the process using soap. And sure, why wouldn't they? For isn't it sunlight chambers, and was one time the headquarters of Barrington's, Levers and Crean's soap manufacturers. Parliament Street is one of the most exciting streets in Dublin. There's Des Bratnock's shop. I must call in later and see if he got any bargains. And I always thought he was an Englishman. The old tailor's shears in Abraham's window. There was a story about a duel in Dublin one time between two master tailors. And when they got out to Drumconda, where the duel was to be held, said, is it pistols or swords? Neither. Tailor's scissors. Could you imagine the two of them at one another with them? The duel ended when one fella had only one ear and the other fella had only half a nose. Well, I was down in the Winding Stair bookcase at the Grattan Bridge, and I bought this lovely book, The Bridal of Drimnagh. And in here is a poem on presenting a pair of scissors to a lady. 'Tis says a scissors or a knife, a saw or shears or cleaver, are harbingers of endless strife between giver and receiver. But sayings like this I little heed, and just to prove their folly, a pair of scissors made by Reed I gave my sweetheart Polly. And then it says Reed's, a celebrated Dublin cutler whose establishment still exists in Parliament Street. December the 22nd, 1882. That's 101 years ago. They were in Parliament Street. They were probably the first shop in Parliament Street because Reed's go back to 1670, possibly making them the oldest cutlers in Europe. Well, John Reed Cowell.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm grand.
Little did I think 40 years ago, looking in that window, making up my mind whether I'd buy a never-ready razor for the one-sided Bohemian blades, yes, or the double-edged for the Max Smile and the Northlight blades, that this is the oldest shop in Dublin City.
That's right, as far as we know.
That the Reeds go back to 1670.
Right.
Where exactly did it start off originally?
Well, the earliest record we have of the Reeds in business was in 1670. There was a sword cutler, a maker of swords, on Blind Quay. That is Lord Exchange Street now. And we were in 1670, as far as we can trace it up, until 1750. 1750 we moved into Crane Lane, which is the rear of Parliament Street.
Yes.
And some years later, 5 or 6 years after that, the first of the wide streets, one of the first was Parliament Street. And we then turned from Crane Lane and faced out into Parliament Street.
Very nice.
Which gave us the benefit of a new street.
You have it here in Watson's 1778, haven't you?
Yes, well, we're in Parliament Street then, of course.
John Reed, Parliament Street.
Yes.
And of course, the two things that you're noted for is the penknife with how many blades?
576 blades.
576 blades.
Yes.
I suppose there isn't a penknife like that.
It was an exhibition knife. It was awarded a prize.
Yeah.
I think 1845 we got a prize from the Dublin Society. That's pre-Royal Dublin.
And this is the smallest scissors, scissors in the world.
Well, we don't have any small. It only measures a quarter of an inch.
A quarter of an inch. As someone says, can it be used?
Well, can it be used? Well, I wouldn't like to cut my toenails.
And this is a miniature knife.
Little table knife.
Yeah.
These are rather well-known knives to do antique collectors. And over the years, very eminent people have collected this sort of thing. And they've had knives and forks to match. Now, one day a lady came in, a very charming lady, and she said, I want you to recondition my knives and forks. And she produced a set of these. And I said to them, well, these are really beautiful, because they had silver mounts on the ends here and silver ferrules around the middle. And I said, that's the most beautiful set I've seen for a long time. I only ever saw one other set with that particular pattern mount. So that's very interesting. Who had the other set? I said, well, I'm sure you won't believe me, but it was the late W.B. Yeats. So she smiled a sad smile and said, I'm Mrs. Yeats.
You were born here,
oh, yes.
But there's nothing has changed in this shop from the day you were born. It's all old world. The sword cases, the Charles Dickens type cash desk, the counters, the display, everything.
Yes,
has it just flished by like that?
Oh, there's been very little change. We've tried not to change it, to maintain it as it was. In fact, people every day, somebody comes in and says, firstly, thank goodness you're still here. I think that's very complimentary.
I think
love
so,
that.
yeah.
And they're now bringing the children in to see the cash register or to see the handles on the door and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I must say, it will be with great regret when I have to pack it up, but I can't keep going forever.
Yes.
However, I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, you've been a great credit to the Cutlers and a great tradition to Dublin City.
Very nice of you, thank you very much.
God bless you.
Goodbye.
So that's what my ear looks like. It's no wonder I can't hear. Garnett and Keegan's, of course, they're a very old Dublin firm, going back more than 100 years, fishing tackle and all sportsman's type equipment. Do you remember there used to be a big glass case here in the window, and there was a big trout in it, which was supposed to have been caught in the Camac River with a butcher's hook. I don't know where it's gone, whether someone had it for their dinner of a Friday. But of course, inside here, you will find Mr. J.R. Harris, the man who wrote the famous book, An Angler's Entomology, which gives the identification of all the insects and flies needed. An angler's dream book. And J.R. Harris is still with us.
There's fast water there, and these little hackles at the end, they vibrate in the current.
Right.
It seems to have an additional attraction to the fish.
Well, yes, I'll have a couple of those, please.
There's one called the Thunder and Lightning.
Oh, yes, I believe that's very good.
It's quite a famous fly, and some people say it was invented on the Moy.
Garnett and Keegan's are famous for their salmon and trout flies. Nuala Scales and Josie Gibbons are experts in this type of work. Tying fishing flies requires a certain expertise and patience. These ladies love their work. Josie, in fact, has spent her whole working life, over 60 years, with Garnett and Keegan's. All the same now, aren't they very swanky flies and hooks? A bit of a change from the old safety pin bent over with a lump of dough bread sitting at the hot iron springs of the Grand Canal looking for gudgeon and pink eens.